As a premier institution for the health sciences, UP Manila prides itself to be a center for excellence in research. But in order to pursue its mandate to serve the Filipino people, there has to be a way to ensure the public's trust and confidence in the institution's research processes. There was a need to create a body tasked to address research integrity and research misconduct. A body that promotes a culture of responsible conduct for researchers. And with these goals in mind, based on the APEC principles of honesty, responsibility, rigor, transparency, respect, fairness, and diversity, the UPM Office of Research Integrity was established.
The objectives of the UP Manila Office of Research Integrity are to create and nurture a culture which encourages and enhances the responsible conduct of research. Research integrity is the active adherence to the ethical principles and professional standards essential for the responsible practice of research, and the office is taking on this mission to elucidate and foster research integrity.
The Office of Research Integrity falls under the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research. It exists to promote research integrity through education and training and through a prompt and just response to allegations of misconduct.
Research misconduct, including plagiarism, falsification, and fabrication, are threats to integrity in the field of research. We need education and awareness campaigns so as to make research integrity a culture in UP Manila. It is a code of research that guides them towards ethical and sound contributions. Researchers are expected to uphold the guidelines, which is why the transition from a Committee of Research Integrity into an Office of Research Integrity promotes a culture of responsible conduct of research.
The dedication to conduct honest and honorable research has always been an advocacy close to the heart of UPM ORI's founding members. And it all began in the year 2019 when one of its members was able to attend the 6th World Conference of Research Integrity. And over the next 3 years, the office was successfully able to hold educational webinars, workshops, lectures, and meetings with other professional societies. Until the present, the UPM ORI continues to live up to its original purpose and uphold the core principles in the Code for Responsible Conduct of Research, with plans of expansion to all existing UP Manila colleges.
Impactful research is founded in trust within the institution. It is a commitment to work with the highest ethical standards, promoting a culture where professional development is encouraged and where there is public confidence in the research produced. In the midst of a growing research enterprise, what happens then when we have questionable data?
How do we ensure that our institution is aligned with the responsible conduct of research? This is where we, the members of the Office of Research Integrity, come in. Our office ensures that researchers uphold the UP values of honor and excellence in an environment that is conducive to trustworthy outputs.
As a public health student, I am given the responsibility to contribute insightful knowledge that can positively impact the lives of others. In our research, we seek to optimize environmental detection methods that scan and flag for the juvenile forms of endemic parasites before they infect humans. Through this way, we can prevent transmission to humans, especially in endemic and marginalized communities. From the proposal stage until the reporting of findings, we are supervised and mentored to undertake the research process responsibly. I personally have attended the Research Integrity and Plagiarism Symposium in 2021. From the live webinars, we students ensure that findings are ethically sound when we contribute to a body of knowledge.
Research integrity has been a guiding principle in the entirety of the research process. The Office of Research Integrity is committed to reach all researchers in the university, from student researchers to faculty members, reps, and administrative staff, and ensure that they have access to relevant information on research integrity and the responsible and professional conduct of research.
It is important that the public perceive scientific research for what it is: a reliable, peer-reviewed collection and evaluation of data. The credibility of science and the public's trust in it relies on the responsible execution of research. After all, it is our Filipino people that academic institutions and researchers serve with their findings.
The UP Manila Office of Research Integrity sets moral leadership across the UP system in leading the responsible pursuit of knowledge. The values of honor and excellence train the intellectual competency of our community's researchers in defining boundaries as we explore frontiers.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Research Integrity Education Caravan organized by the UP Manila College of Arts and Sciences. I am Dr. Erwin Leyva, head of the Research and Creative Writing Program of the UP College of Nursing. We are currently being live streamed, so we have a hybrid event. Some are actually joining us on Zoom today. So welcome. I will be joined today in moderating this event by Dr. Jean Ann Toral, Quorum and Coordinator for Research and Chief, PGH Aero. Doc Jean.
Maraming salamat, Professor Erwin, at magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. No? Naggagalak ang Office of Research Integrity na nandito kami ngayon sa UP CAS. No? So ito ay ang unang pagkakataon na mag-face-to-face caravan kami. No? So without further ado, I would like to call on our Chancellor, Karencita D. Padilla, for her welcome message.
Vice Chancellor Edward Wang, CES Dean Maricon Carillo, speakers, participants, good morning. It is a pleasure to welcome you to the 4th edition of the Education Caravan, organized by the Office of Research Integrity. This 4th edition is the first for this year, and it is being held by the College of Arts and Sciences, where research is as diverse as its program offerings. I commend the ORI or ORI for continuing to uphold the highest standards of responsible research at UP Manila through this activity. Awareness and education campaigns such as this caravan further strengthen our researchers, their practices, and their outputs. As research is central to our vision, it has never been more important that we instill misinformation. With the diverse research in UP Manila, our researches are increasing by leaps and bounds and have become more collaborative and complex. Maintaining and even enriching a healthy research environment requires a delineation and cultivation of responsible conduct of research. The CAS is a hub for relevant themes for health research, particularly its sociocultural determinants that comprise a huge part of healthcare. Our recently launched programs in health integrity. To our researchers and participants, may this webinar help empower you to recognize and respond to any scientific misconduct you might be confronted with in the course of your research. May your engagement with the participants of this webinar aid you to create new knowledge and technologies that are not only beneficial to society, but are conducted along high moral standards. As one of the leading research units of UP Manila, the CAS is poised to develop the capacity of its researchers more and nurture in them a culture of research integrity through this capability building activity. So my advice to you all, when you couple your efforts with a strong commitment to research integrity, your scientific efforts will be worth their weight in gold. Thank you very much at mabuhay kayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Padilla. So now it's time to call on the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, herself a prolific researcher, Dean Maria Constancia Carrillo.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the College of Arts and Sciences Administration, I'd like to welcome you all to today's Research Integrity Education Caravan being held by the Office of Research Integrity of UP Manila. All of us have our basic value set that allows us to assess what is right versus what is wrong. But there are specific guidelines that need to be followed for doing research. And faculty, research staff, and students need to learn and be continuously reminded of norms of conduct that distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable behavior in research. These include norms such as prohibitions against fabricating, falsifying, or misrepresenting research data, promoting truth and minimizing error, and also less intuitive aspects processes and practices that are essential to collaborative work, and confidentiality rules in peer review. It is really ideal that beginning researchers, such as the bulk of our attendees today, are undergraduate students who are performing their senior thesis, be aware of these guidelines, which will hopefully be in their future careers. And of course, in what is acceptable and what is not. But as long as we are aware of the basic for coordinating this event with our Office of the Associate Dean for Research and Public Service, headed by Dr. Chris Robidillo, and of course to our research speakers for sharing their expertise to the CAS community. This is actually part of a series of workshops that we have been holding at CAS in our shared quest of empowering our CAS community, and indeed all of UP Manila in building a culture of research. And I'm sure this will be a wonderful learning experience for all of our participants. Again, thank you very much, and I wish you all a good day.
Thank you very much, Dean Carrillo. So now it's time to start with our program proper. And to draw first here in the stage, we have, of course, the head of the office of the UP Manila Office of Research Integrity. He's also the Vice Chancellor for Research of UP Manila, an orthopedic surgeon par excellence, specializing in bone tumors, a very prolific researcher, member of the editorial board of many journals, let me call to the stage Dr. Edward Wang.
Thank you, Dr. Toral. Thank you. Just from her introduction, alam mo na she's a good friend. Okay. So, good morning everyone, and it's really nice to be here kasi first time na yung educational caravan is balik tayo sa face-to-face, di ba? And so this gives us an opportunity to interact more closely and for you to ask questions and for us to respond, I guess, in a more intimate fashion. So, ang role ko ngayon is really just to introduce to you the topic. So, I'll give you an overview of research integrity, give you a sort of historical background, ano yung content ng research integrity, and ano yung office ng research integrity sa atin. No? Okay. So, ito yung short history ng... Can I actually remove this? Pwede. Sige, can you remove one for me? So, ito yung history ng US Office of Research Integrity kasi doon really nag-umpisa eh. So, in the late 70s to 80s, may nangyari kasi doon na there were 12 major cases of scientific misconduct, including 4 cases that were funded by the National Institutes of Health. And they occurred in Ivy League universities. And why was it so important? Kasi yung funding came from people's taxes, di ba? So, kailangan may responsibility yung government. Minomonitor nila yung kung anong nangyari sa pera. And, syempre, hindi mo isipin na it will happen in Ivy League universities, but it did. And we will use one of the cases as an example. I always use this case kasi it's very interesting and we can very well relate to it. And this is the case of the Summerlin's painted mouse. No, it happened in the New York Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. That's probably one of the most famous cancer centers. So si Dr. Summerlin, who was an immunology fellow, showed that it was possible to do successful skin transplantation from black mice to white mice without any kind of immunosuppression. Tapos believe sa kanya yung kanyang mga mentors and the board. But the one who found out that there was some question to it was yung animal caretaker. Because when the mice were brought back to their cages, natatanggal yung black skin. And what was the reason? Because si Dr. Summerlin had gone to National Bookstore, bought felt pen, tapos pininturahan niya yung skin ng white mice with black. But the pictures taken, parang tunay. So people believed it, but they found out that it was fake. So that was a problem of research integrity. And this other list here, ganun din eh. Iba-ibang cases. And so that became a painting the mouse became synonymous with academic fraud, research fraud. And the attention was brought up, syempre sa news, the media took on, and then there were these issues in Time, Science Under Siege, Great Betrayal. And basically, parang sinasabi, the scientific community had shown a general unwillingness to guard against fraud and misconduct within our own community. And so there was a lot of debate. And finally, it was defined. What is misconduct in science? And so the definition was defined. It was defined as falsification, fabrication, plagiarism, or other practices that seriously deviate from those that are commonly accepted. Di ba? So, you can't fabricate. Hindi ka dapat mag-falsify. You can't plagiarize. Of course, it does not include honest error, di ba? Now, as a result of the heated discussions in government, nagde-decide sila, nagde-debate sila, whose responsibilities is it? Anong role ng scientific community to monitor itself? So, the reason I said Congress had a legitimate concern is because that was people's money. That was taxpayers' money. Finally, the oversight of all of this kind of scientific misconduct was assigned to the Office of Research Integrity, which was created in 1993 under their Department of Health. So yan yung parang pinaka-origin ng Office of Research Integrity and the reason why it came about. Okay. So today, you will see in different countries all over the world, there is such a code which defines research misconduct, which defines problems of research integrity. And we have that also in UP Manila. So this is taken from the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity, and it tells you here ano yung violations. They're traditionally described as the big sins are yung tatlo, fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. And those three sins are defined as fabrication is when you make up the results. Falsification is when you manipulate the results. And plagiarism is when you use other people's work and ideas without giving proper attribution. So those are the big sins. Pero, hindi lang yan yung itatackle natin ngayon. That's not all of research integrity. Those are the three big sins. So when you talk about research integrity, you're basically talking about responsible conduct of research, di ba? How you conduct your research. And on one end of the spectrum is the way we'd like to do it properly. And when we do it properly, we say we want to be relevant, responsible, and honest, di ba? And these are the important attributes there. There has to be honesty, responsibility, rigor, transparency, respect, fairness, and diversity. You'll see this again later on in our own code of conduct. But what's the other end of the spectrum? So this is the good side. Ano yung other end of the spectrum? Yan yung sinasabi nating fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism, di ba? So yan yung three big sins. So on the left side are the how you would like the research culture to be like. On the right side are the three big sins. But in between, there is what we call the questionable research practice or sloppy science. And what happens there is, hindi siya yung three big sins, but these sloppy science, sometimes because of ignorance, because of carelessness, ito yung mga problems that we see. Problems of authorship, di ba? I'm sure that will be tackled later on, and it will be very interesting for you to listen what the problems are all about. And you yourself have questions about authorship. Kailangan ba ang senior ko ang maging senior author? Sometimes hindi ka dapat author, tapos kinukuha yung paper na maging author ka. Those issues like that are not the big sins, but they are the in-between. Yan yung questionable research practice, which actually contributes probably to bigger problems in research integrity when taken all together compared to the three big sins. Okay, so research integrity, how does it differ from research ethics? Ang research integrity is when you want to make sure that research is undertaken responsibly. So when your research is published, when your paper is published, when you disseminate that, when you present it in fora, people will believe it because alam nila that the way it was undertaken was correct, was responsible, walang cheating, hindi ka nag-fabricate, di ba? Research ethics basically is when the idea is there, the protection of the rights and welfare of the research participants, humans, animals. Yan yung research ethics. So that's very different from research integrity. Okay. Now, let me show you this case. Let's start off with this case. This was a publication in the Lancet in 1998 by Dr. Wakefield. And what it showed was that there was a connection between bowel disease, autism, and the MMR. Diba? Now, that, of course, raised a lot of concerns sa parents. Kasi paano ka magbibigay ng vaccine ng mga anak tapos you will result in these problems? That can't happen. That was a big issue. And people started not wanting to have those vaccinations because of the possible problems. But later on, it was found out that first of all, the results could not be replicated. At the same time, there was implication. There was an exchange of money between the authors and the lawyers who were representing patients who were suing the vaccination companies, the vaccine companies. And so eventually that article was retracted. Ibig sabihin, tinanggal, di ba? Na-publish na. Then the journal removes it from the publication, from the journal, kasi na-retract. So that's what retraction means. Pero by that time, it had already done its damage. And over the period of the pandemic, and up to now, you still have people who have refused vaccination, di ba? We've all felt this. And not just for the pandemic problem, but even for many other things. And people believe that this has resulted in deaths, actually. There are people refusing the MMR. So you can imagine how big an impact that problem of research integrity was. Number one, the results were fabricated. They were not true. But because it was published and people believed it and it's been propagated, that has resulted in a lot of harm to us. So yan yung big impact ng research, ng problems in research integrity. But does that happen only in, for example, the US, where you have these big researchers in the NIH, in Memorial Sloan Kettering, or in London, where you have these kinds of problems about the exchange of money between the lawyers and maybe the authors of the paper? It's not only there. It's a global issue. Everyone meets problems of research integrity. And what's the reason? I think as the UP Manila grows and the research infrastructure grows, these issues come in. Over the past many years, in the UP Manila alone, the quantity of researchers has increased. Of course, the quality has increased with it. The number of researchers have increased. Collaborations between national and international organizations have increased. There's a lot of fun. There's a lot more awareness among faculty and among students about promotions, about merit promotions, how you can improve your ranking because of research. There's training requirement. All of you will have requirements of research publications, or you have to undertake research before you can finish your course, diba? So there's a pressure to publish. And because of that, then the issues of research integrity come in. I want to meet a deadline, so I have to finish this. I'll fabricate the data. I want to be number one in my class. I have to get the best research. So I'll falsify data. So things like that come in. And the faculty wants to become professor. So I'll just submit any kind of paper I want, but I'll just manipulate it a bit. No one will know. So those are the issues that come in. So it is not something that is unique to other countries or in developed countries. It's something that's unique. It's something that's global and affects everyone. And as the research infrastructure grows, it becomes a bigger issue. So again, ito yung violations of responsible conduct of research. And today we will talk about that. Falsification, fabrication, plagiarism. And among the in-between, we will be talking about authorship and about predatory journals. So remember that no one is spared also. Just as no institution is spared, all of us are subject to these kinds of problems. And si Professor Gonzalez actually has a very nice article about it. And it's called We're All Subject to Tragedies. Tragedies meaning we're all subject to the temptation of trying to change the data a little bit. We're all subject to rationalization. We'll say na we've worked so hard. It's okay, baka konting tweak lang. Instead of making it 3.9, we'll make it 3.5 na lang. So no one will know that. Ambition. I want to graduate on time and I want to be cum laude. And I have to submit these articles right away. Group pressure. Baka sabihin ng aking kasama na pangit yung research ko because the results turned out negative, so I'll change it a little bit. Entitlement. I should get away with this. I should be given a chance to produce a good research. I've been working so hard for UP Manila. Deception. I'll do this now so that people won't know anyway, di ba? So I'll be able to get my award. And incrementalism. You start with something small. a small tweak in your data, tomorrow you'll be doing it in an increasing fashion. So more and more, you'll be encouraged to do that. You'll be braver to do that. Embarrassment and stupid systems. We all work in stupid systems which allow these things. So we need to all be very aware that research integrity is a problem, not an institutional problem alone, but also our own problem. And so that's been corroborated over the past few years in the UP Manila. We are a rapidly growing research enterprise. And the cases referred recently to the REB, to the OPCR, have not so much been about unethical practice as they were about inappropriate ways of doing research. So we've been getting referrals about authorship issues. We've been getting referrals about predatory journals. We've been getting issues about people who are falsifying some of the data. So there's mounting pressure also from faculty and students for recognition and promotion, di ba? And because of all this international funding, that's why naging important na mag-set up tayo ng Office of Research Integrity. And that office is there not only to monitor but respond to allegations, and most importantly to educate and make all of us aware about research integrity. And this is an office which has these tasks, but it involves every single person in the community of UP Manila. Hindi siya pwedeng office lang. Hindi siya pwedeng ORI members lang. Dapat including all of the colleges, all of the deans, all of the staff, all of the faculty, all of the students, no? So including the funding agencies, including yung nagmo-monitor ng researches. And so there is this World Conference on Research Integrity, which happens every 2 years. And the first global forum was convened to provide researchers, research administrators, research sponsors, journal editors, etc., an opportunity to discuss strategies for harmonizing research misconduct. And this has been going on since 2007, and over the past few years, we've been able to attend the last two, the one in Hong Kong and the one in South Africa. Although sayang by Zoom lang yung South Africa. Yung Hong Kong, I was able to attend that. But the thing that is important here is, tingnan nyo, in each of those conferences may specific topics na pinag-uusapan. No? And sometimes it's really how to monitor or ano yung measures of yung research integrity, or yung iba is parang ano yung measures for individual researchers. How do you say that they're doing properly? Ganon. And sometimes kasi even those measures are ways that we should improve on to improve research integrity. So when I say all involved, we have to think of research integrity as something that involves the entire UP Manila. So kung halimbawa masyadong late dumadating yung funding mo for your study, that in itself can already be an impetus for breaching research integrity. Within your own groups in UP Manila, student groups doing researches, if there's a lot of pressure to not do the correct thing, that's also something that will pressure you to breach research integrity. So all of us are involved. We need to create that culture, and we need to create that environment which will enhance research integrity. And this is our timeline. No? So in June of 2019, I was able to attend the Hong Kong Conference for Research Integrity. And over the years, we've been able to hold webinars. We've been able to come up with the research, which is ongoing, which we've been able to come up with a code for research integrity for the UP Manila. And over the past years, we've had 4 webinars in 2021. Then 2022, we started the education caravan because we want this to be something that goes around UP Manila. And so today, you're actually seeing number 4, education caravan number 4. So very quickly, this is the UP Manila Code for Responsible Conduct of Research. And in it, you will have a preamble, and then you have the principles. The principles are honesty, responsibility, rigor, as we said kanina, based on the APEC guiding principles for research integrity. So the APEC has all of these principles which we patterned our code onto. And tingnan mo yung meron siyang translations into the different languages in the Asia-Pacific area. And dito in Tagalog, meron doon 4 lines from below. And so itong APEC guiding principles are honesty, again, responsibility, making sure that you fulfill all the duties and obligations, rigor, being very careful but at the same time very thorough, transparency, respect, fairness, and diversity. And ito yung UP Manila Code natin. So preamble principles, andun din nakasulat yung responsibilities of the institution researcher, and then we talk about the violations. So itong UP Manila Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research is available to you online, and we're very proud to say that it's been adopted by the UP system. So it's not a UP Manila Code, but it's a UP system code for the responsible conduct of research. It was approved for UP system use in 2021. So nasaan yung Office of Research Integrity? It's an office under the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research. And dito makita mo sa number 4, it's one of the 10 different committees or offices under it. So again, the Office of Research Integrity here is, while we encourage, diba, the UP Manila, the university encourages you to go beyond, think outside the box and go beyond just your classroom, do active research. And while we explore frontiers, the Office of Research Integrity helps define the boundaries as we explore these frontiers. And so we want to promote research integrity and at the same time respond to allegations. So in very, very short, in summary, we can say research integrity is the foundation of trust within the scientific community, within our community, that enables members to build on each other's works. Diba? If you don't have that research integrity, how can I build on, for example, Dr. Toral's work? I wouldn't know na kung baka naman hindi yan totoo. But because there is research integrity, we know we can build on it. And then in general terms, responsible conduct is simply good citizenship applied to professional life. So thank you very much for listening to this introduction. Enjoy the webinar, and as it is brought to you by the office together with the College of Arts and Sciences. Thank you, Dr. Toral and Dr. Erwin.
Maraming salamat, Dr. Wang. Nakalimutan ko palang sabihin, siya rin po ang convener ng UP-CIBOL, no? So yung mga Surgical Innovations Group. Marami po talagang trabaho si Dr. Wang, no? And many interests, no? So our next presenter is also an equally prolific researcher, has many tasks also, but he's a neonatologist by clinical practice. Or nagpa-practice ka pa ba? Neonat. But he's also the current chair of the UP College of Medicine Department of Clinical Epidemiology. Of course, all of you will pass your researches, and all these researches will pass through the office which he leads, the UP Manila Research Ethics Board. He's also, of course, the chair of the DOH Single Joint Ethics Review Board. So he's also part of the Health Technology Assessment Council of DOH as a core member. So to talk on fabrication and falsification, may I call on Dr. Jacinto Blas V. Mantaring III.
Salamat, Jean, at thank you very much, Dr. Wang, for giving an introduction to research integrity, which will actually make my work much easier. No? Ayan. How do I use this? Ayan. Okay, so my talk will focus on fabrication, falsification, and fabrication. Pero it's very difficult to talk about this without talking about a little bit about research integrity in general. So just to reiterate some of the things that Dr. Wang has already said, this is what I'll talk about. No? Just a few reiterations about what is research integrity. Then I'll give a few representative cases. You might even appreciate that this could happen to you, yung mga nangyayari yung that I'm going to be showing you. Then I'll talk about scientific misconduct. And actually, Dr. Wang also talked about the big three: fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. But I won't be talking about, ano ba to? I won't be talking about
plagiarism because there's a different speaker for that. And then the scope, because as Dr. Wang has said, there's a very wide spectrum of what constitutes research integrity issues and the prevalence. So just to reiterate, what is research integrity? I just wanted to say here that when you talk about research ethics, it is to protect the rights and the welfare of the research participant. And I think that in this campus, we have all been exposed already to research ethics. I understand that the students all over the campus are already being made to attend research ethics and good research practices seminars and webinars. Pero yung research integrity is relatively new, no? And research integrity is active adherence to the ethical principles. So it also involves some form of ethics and the professional standards essential for the responsible conduct in research. So the professional standards is really what is being emphasized, no? But both will involve some form of ethics. And these are just a few practices that characterize responsible research conduct. And it sounds actually obvious, diba? Honesty and fairness in the whole process of the research, from proposing to performing and even reporting. Accuracy and fairness in representing contributions, so that is authorship. Proficiency and fairness in the peer review. Even in the peer review, no, there can be some research integrity malpractice. Collegiality in scientific informations. Communications and sharing of resources. That's the culture wherein, I don't know if it's predominant, but you don't want to share your results, diba? And then disclosure of conflicts of interest, protection of human subjects in the conduct of research, humane care of animals, and adherence to the mutual responsibilities of mentors and trainees. So in general terms, and I like this is from Nicholas Tenek from the University of Michigan, responsible conduct in research is simply good citizenship applied to professional life, applied particularly to research. And so let's go to a few representative cases. I don't know if, but if you do a Google search on which are the most celebrated fabrication and falsification, you will likely get this name, Diederik Alexander Stapel, who is a Dutch professor of social psychology at Tilburg University. And in 2011, Tilburg University suspended Stapel for fabricating and manipulating data for his research publications. Actually, the most affected were his master's students and doctoral students who were working with him, because they based their thesis and dissertations on his previous theories, only to find out that his theories were fabricated. So a number of the dissertations are thought to be based on fabricated data, and kawawa naman yung mga students niya, pati yung mga publications sila na-retract, no, because of his misconduct. No. This is just an example of one of his publications, Self-Activation Increases Social Compassion. It was a series of studies, mostly qualitative, pero parang they never found notes about his interviews, about his focus group discussions. So highly questionable yung results ng kanyang study. And if you look, it led to the investigation of his other publications. And if you do a search sa PubMed, makikita mo retracted. So, okay, this is another one. This is Anil Poti. He's Indian by descent, no, a physician, a former Duke University associate professor, cancer researcher, and he was focusing on oncogenomics. And he purported, or he postulated to show that gene activity in a patient's tumor cells could be used to determine which chemotherapeutic drugs would most be effective for that patient. In November of 2015, the Office of Research Integrity of Duke University found that he fabricated data. And as of 2020, 11 of his research publications were retracted, and one publication has received an expression of concern, and 2 others have been corrected. What's funny is, his theories are actually accepted now. No? You can really tell from the genes that a patient will respond better to certain chemotherapies. Kaya lang, he never showed the data that conclusively showed that. No? He fabricated all of his data. And again, retraction. I don't think he's a faculty member anymore of his institution. And then Dr. Wang already told you the story about Andrew Wakefield. He's a British surgeon. He authored a landmark article, 1998 Lancet publication, imagine Lancet, linking autism and inflammatory bowel disease to MMR vaccination. And he said it was the combination of the measles, MMR's measles, mumps, rubella. It was the combination of the three that was the risk factor for increasing the risk to autism. Actually, I was already practicing as a pediatrician at the time na pumutok to, no? And I felt the impact because the patients would come to me and say, what's this I hear about the association of MMR? And even many years after, ang hirap i-reverse. I would show them my patients' articles. Na-retract na yan. There are even simple infographics and comics pa, which was meant for patients to appreciate the impact of the falsification. And yet, they were very reluctant to get vaccinated. The problem with this, well, the first two representative cases I showed really didn't lead to loss of lives. What they led to was perhaps retraction of their publications and retraction of the publications of their students. But this led to a loss of lives. Because in the 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000s, in the UK, there was a movement. It was an anti-vax movement, which still exists today. And it was estimated that thousands of newborns, thousands of infants, probably died unnecessarily because the parents refused to have them vaccinated for measles. There was actually a measles outbreak in the UK at the time. And even if Lancet retracted it, even if there are so many information, there's so much information in the web, there are so many infographics, and even published material that you can use to show your patients, it has still led to some form of hesitancy, vaccine hesitancy. That was a buzzword, no, during COVID, no? Vaccine hesitancy. So for individuals, research integrity is an aspect of moral character and experience. It involves, above all, a commitment to intellectual honesty, personal responsibility for one's actions, and a range of practices that characterizes responsible conduct of research. And I just wanted to show you the spectrum of research practices. Kasi the ideal will be what we refer to as the responsible conduct in research, which is that you will do research which is relevant, you will be responsible for your research, and you will be honest in all aspects of the research. That's one spectrum. On the other spectrum, the extreme, is research misconduct. And in research misconduct, these are where the big three. So research misconduct is not the same as research integrity. No? Yung pinakagrabing research integrity issues is research misconduct, and that is fraudulent research by virtue of it being falsified or fabricated or even plagiarized. There's something wrong with the slide. You cannot see the last line, but it's supposed to say plagiarized under fabrication. But research integrity concerns also itself with the middle, the gray area, kung sasabihin, which is known as questionable research practices. And sometimes it can be considered just sloppy research, not doing research with rigor, parang taking shortcuts, mga making, diba, if you don't calibrate, then it's error prone. So yun ang mga issues na questionable research practices. Doing one replicate instead of three, mga ganyan. So it's error prone, it's ignorant, it's lacking in diligence. And although these research practices are questionable, they are still part of the scope of what we concern ourselves in research integrity. So as much as possible, we would like to promote responsible conduct in research, relevant, responsible, honest. That's the culture that we want to promote. And that's the reason why we have this educational caravan. We want everyone to practice that. No? Of course, we don't want the extreme. And we also want your researches to be done well, responsibly, so that they won't be error prone. And the difference really between research misconduct and questionable research practice is intent. The research misconduct, there really is an intent to deceive. There is really an intent to misrepresent, to pass off your data as if it was real data, even if you know it wasn't. No? And Dr. Wang already had mentioned that honest mistake, nagkamali lang, honestly, is not considered research misconduct. That's an honest mistake. So intent is really. So now let's focus on fabrication and falsification. So these are the big three, part of the big three, two out of the big three, fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. Fabrication is making up data or results, or recording or reporting them. Falsification is manipulating research materials, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting data or results such that the research is not actually represented in the research record. How do you differentiate the two? Actually, it's very hard to falsify and not fabricate. Pero in falsification, there actually is data. Dinoktor mo lang. In fabrication, there may not be actually data. Inimbento mo lang yung data na yan. You falsified the data. And there are researchers who have been found questioned, how can they come up with that much data in so short a time without fabricating it? So, yeah. Plagiarism, of course, is the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. And this will be tackled by the next speaker. No? So this is the spectrum of fabrication. Inventing data sources. Oh, there's something wrong with my slide. Everything is going to be down. So completing missing data. Now, sometimes nag-shortcut. No? And sometimes when you do that, it doesn't change the data. For example, you have missing data, and then you will fill in the blanks, and you will fill in the blanks with data that will not change the overall results. The mean weight of the babies will still be the same, di ba? Pero inimbento mo pa rin yung data. Category 1, 2, or 3, there is still manipulation of the image. No? So it's there's no lesser sin. They're all sins, even if it takes more effort to do category 3 than category 1. And these are just examples. So, mahirap pala to i-point. Anyway, if you look closely, the images in the green are identical. Pinaliit lang ng konti, tapos linagay sa second panel. The images that are in the blue box, pareho rin ang laman. No? And it was software that was able to capture that these images were manipulated. In the chromatography data, at least the last one, which is supposed to be category 3, 9 and 10, the blots are the same. Then the middle one, the green are the same. Beta-actin, that's supposed to be one run. The second run, parang pinaste niya yung data niya sa first run dito sa second run. So, anyway, as I've said, whether it's category 1, 2, or 3, it's still data manipulation, image manipulation. And even more curious is that the percentage of papers containing inappropriate image duplication increases by year of publication. You cannot see the slide, but the last entry is 2014, and the first entry is 1995. And you can see that there is a steady increase in the number of manipulated images in the journals. The peak was in 2006. And actually, it also coincides with the availability of software that allows you to cut and paste. Siguro marami nang bumibili ng Adobe, ano ba yung pang-Adobe? Yan. Yan. Photoshop, di ba? Photoshop, yan. So I think that's also the year when sobrang gumaganda yung mga tao na nagpo-post sa Facebook kasi puro naka-Photoshop yung picture. But yan, this was a study of 40 journals, and this is a subset of 16 journals that was found to have some form of manipulation of the images. And this one is the prevalence of fabrication and falsification. This was actually a systematic review of all the studies that looked at self-reported and observed behavior. Essentially, there were so many articles that came out that asked scientists, have you ever falsified or fabricated? And they compared, and then they also asked in that same questionnaire, do you know of any colleague who has falsified or fabricated? And look at the data. It's really very curious. Oops. Sayang, walang pointer. But at least one FFP. FFP is falsification, fabrication, or plagiarism. When they self-reported, 2.9 lang, with a confidence interval of 2.1 to 3.8. But when they report that they know of a colleague, it goes up to 15.5%. Parang 5 times increase in the prevalence if you report other people compared to if you report yourself. And that was the same pattern. From 2, fabrication, magiging 12.4, so 6 times increase. Falsification, 3.3, magiging 10.4, 3 times increase. Plagiarism, yun ang pinakamataas. From 3.2, naging 24. So parang 8 times increase. There's an 8 times increase in the observed misconduct compared to self-reported. And unspecified questionable research practices, yun yung gray area. It's 12.5, but it goes up to as high as 40% if it was observed. So, and this is also very interesting because the scientists who did that study also did the same study for plagiarism. And they plotted, and they found out that if the incidence, the prevalence of plagiarism is high, then falsification and fabrication is also high. So parang systemic, it's institutional. If you belong to an institution where plagiarism is high, then falsification and fabrication is also high. And that means the solution should be an institutional solution. Okay, I think, this is self-reported compared to observed. What happened? Sorry, I think I accidentally pressed. Hindi ko kinukuha yung lecture mo, Kevin. But I think I accidentally pressed the clicker. Layo. Nakita niyo na yung lahat ng lecture. Paano ba to? Paano to binibilisan? Kasi matatapos na naman yung akin. Ayan. Okay. Nandito na ako. Yan. So anyway, in summary, fabrication, falsification are considered grave research misconduct that may have considerable impact on the integrity and the results of the studies. The prevalence is as high as 20% when it's observed. Image duplication actually has a prevalence as high as 45%, which has shown a rapid increase over time. And what differentiates research misconduct from questionable research practices actually is intent. So I think that's it. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
All right, so thank you very much, Dr. Mantaring. No, we're very lucky today to have a panel of experts on the subject matter, and hopefully ay hindi po mangyari sa atin tong mga nire-report no na falsification and fabrication. And I would be interested, siguro if you still have time, no, to know bakit kaya sila nag-fabricate or nag-falsify, because definitely yung root cause nung falsification and fabrication, no, doon tayo pwedeng gumawa ng certain interventions. So yung atin pong next speaker, no, is going to talk about a very common issue, no, especially sa atin. No, he's going to talk about plagiarism. Yung ating speaker is Ralph Kevin Hinugin, who is an assistant professor at the College of Allied Medical Professions, UP Manila. He obtained his MS in Public Health from the College of Public Health of the same university. His academic interests include item response theory modeling of educational and psychological data and promotion of musculoskeletal health of older Filipino adults. So isang masigabong palakpak po para sa isa sa mga very energetic, enthusiastic at aktibong miyembro ng Office of Research Integrity. Sir Kevin?
Thank you, Dr. Leva, for that very generous introduction. So, hello everyone, I'm Kevin. I'll be talking about plagiarism. Sige, so before we delve into the specifics, let's have a simple case. So we have two characters in this case, Alfredo tsaka si Smith. Alfredo is the mentee, tapos si Smith is the mentor. So, long story short, may idea si Alfredo na pinresent niya sa college, and it has received, the research proposal has received considerable interest. Pinraise ni Smith yung kanyang research. Pero hindi niya ma-pursue daw collaboratively kasi kailangan niyang umalis ng bansa. So that's the background of that story. Tapos, later, a year later, nalaman ni Alfredo to his dismay na Smith was actually implementing a rather large-scale study of what seems to be an offshoot nung pinag-usapan nila ng shinare ni Alfredo sa college before. Tapos, in addition, na-presenta ni Smith yung results of a preliminary findings niya sa isang conference. So, si Alfredo ngayon, iniisip niya, gusto niya i-contact yung kanyang mentor, si Smith, and claim authorship. However, ayaw niya, of course, ayaw ma-jeopardize yung relationship with an old friend, a mentor. While it is noteworthy to say na hindi naman nila napag-usapan kung ano yung authorship ng study na to, Alfredo feels na the idea was partly his mentor's, but primarily his own. So, based on this case, we will determine, or we will discuss, is this plagiarism, or is this something else? Is this QRP or questionable research practice or something else, Sige. So our questions would be, did Smith commit plagiarism? Anong factors that contributed to the situation? And what could the researchers have done to prevent the situation from occurring in the future? So let's discuss plagiarism. It is the P in FFP. So if research integrity is a spectrum, nandun siya sa pinakadulo sa fraudulent research. So definitions are here, but in a nutshell, it is using other people's work as your own, without giving them appropriate credit. So what are the potential causes of plagiarism? So being in academia, siguro relatable ang first one, which is the intense pressure to publish, kung yatawag pang publish or perish rule. For example, o kaya pwedeng hindi alam what constitutes plagiarism. May ginagawa na practices na common pero plagiarism na plan, pero hindi alam. And then finally, lack of awareness of skills. When it comes to cultural differences or language differences, like when you just translate a work from one language to another and claim it as your own. That's plagiarism. No? Other causes would be the following. No? So for example, maraming information is easy to access. No? There's writing under stress, poor time management, inadequate or immature writing skills. Kaya nagpa-play din ng role ang ating supervisors or ating mentors sa pag-avoid ng students ng plagiarism. No? Of course, we also have the work environment. No? So poor team culture, walang pakialam ng supervisor, for example, that pakialam ng student. No? Just do whatever you want. That could contribute to plagiarism. Time pressure and individual factors. No? Or intentionality, ikaw mismo, you're not a person of integrity, for example, kaya you're prone to doing fraudulent research. Na. And what are the consequences of plagiarism? Dr. Wang, Dr. Tural, and Dr. Mantaring have already enumerated these. No? So damage to reputation, no? Reputation ng author, reputation ng co-authors, ng institution, no? Ng reviewer na nag-allow ng publication, for example, ng editor na nag-allow ng publication to be published in their journals, for example. No? Retraction of papers. No? And if you have observed sa presentations kanina, hindi basta-bastang nawawala ang papel sa database. No? They don't just disappear. In fact, they remain there, but they have the word retracted appended to them. No? So imagine someone searching for papers, tapos nakikita niya, this author, sobrang daming retracted papers. No? So what could that mean? No? So that's very bad on the side of on the author. No? Tapos siguro an extreme form would be rescission of degree, babawiin yung degree, if it was proven na your dissertation, for example, your thesis, may plagiarized data, pwedeng bawiin yung degree sa yan. And other potential consequences would be the following. So for example, expulsion, di ba sa university na to, you can get expelled for academic dishonesty, termination of your appointment, you redo the requirements or you get a failure. No? And isa pa, since na in relation to this one, sa damaged reputation, nako-call into question yung present work mo, mako-call into question din yung previous work mo, and pwedeng ma-call into question yung future work that you will do since you have a record of having plagiarized works na. Siguro one important thing to mention here would be the deprivation of recognition to the author who has been plagiarized. No? Hindi na pupunta yung honor or kanyang award due that person. No? And pwedeng magkaroon ng undeserved benefit the person who has plagiarized. No? Mapupunta yung benefit sa kanya. And important to note din siguro that the scientific community or the general public may have decreased trust sa scientific community because of this act of research misconduct. No? And siguro finally dito, kung nalaman na ikaw ay nag-plagiarize, susulatan ka ng letter, papa-explain ano nangyari dito. Is this just a minor misunderstanding? Is this an honest error? O kaya you really have an intentionality to plagiarize. No? So pwedeng magbayad ka rin ng compensation sa person na pinplagiarize niya. No? So what are the forms of plagiarism? In a nutshell, may dalawang forms. No? So the plagiarism of text and the other one's plagiarism of ideas. No? So based on these definitions, no? Plagiarism of ideas is a bit much more difficult to prove. No? Kasi it's unwritten, mostly unwritten, napag-usapan ninyo, tapos mamaya ginagamit niya na. No? So, kinuha niya yung idea from you. No? So, kanina ba talaga nagaling ang idea? So, it's a bit harder to prove compared to there's a textual evidence and you just present proof that this work is not this person's, pero claim niya as his or her own. No? And under these two forms of plagiarism, marami pang sub-forms, no? Which are too many to enumerate here. But let's just discuss a few. No? So collusion, pinagawa mo sa iba yung paper mo, tapos you claim that it's your own. So that's collusion. Graphics, essentially copy-paste graphics without citing. That's plagiarism of graphics. Compound plagiarism, you copy works, and then you make sure na hindi siya madidetect ng anti-plagiarism software, plagiarism detection tools. No? Talagang deliberate yung efforts doon. That's compound. Translational, you publish a work in this language, you publish the same work in another language, without notifying the publishers na they are the same work. That's translational plagiarism. If you present your own work as a new work, no, that's self-plagiarism or text recycling. You copy someone else's work, tapos you deliberately change the citations para hindi ma-detect, no? Plagiarism with citation manipulation. Unconscious plagiarism or cryptomnesia, no? And this usually happens kapag nag-uusap kayo ng colleague niyo, for example, may na-raise na idea, tapos it didn't make sense at that time or hindi siya useful at that time. Tapos later on, nagka-epiphany kayo na, oh, I have an idea that's quite new, no? But in fact, it was already discussed with your colleague, for example. Tapos you claim that as your own. That's unconscious plagiarism. And finally, patch writing or mistake plagiarism. Copy-paste, just change a few words, no? Yung should, ginawa yung will, no? Iba-iba. Yung nag-synonyms lang kayo, no? That's mistake plagiarism. So we have various ways to detect plagiarism, no? And here are just a few, no? So strategies involved would be matching identical passages. So medyo demano siya, no? Mukhang pareho yung passage na to sa passage na to, so potentially plagiarized yung work. O kaya mixed passages, no? Hindi same yung tone or yung style ng paper, no? Dito nag-American English siya, tapos bigla sa section 2 British English na ginamit niya, no? So potentially plagiarized work among others. Search engines can be used, no? And we have plagiarism detection tools or anti-plagiarism software such as Authenticate or Turnitin, no? And siguro if all these fail, the last line, no, of the authors, readers, and editors, reviewers, no, to take a look at your work and to detect if this is potentially similar with another person's work, no, among others. No. Other considerations when using anti-plagiarism detection tools will be the following. No. Propriety, may bayad ba? No, mahal ba? Hindi ma-acquire, no, compared to open source. Do you need to download it? Do you need to upload your work to the internet, for example, which has some privacy concerns as well. Kanino ba yung ownership ng file na yun kapag in-upload nyo na, for example. Language support, baka may PDT, plagiarism detection tools na hindi nagsusupport ng certain languages. And finally, file format compatibility. Dahil kailangan ba naka-DOCX, kailangan ba naka-PDF, kailangan ba naka-LaTeX, for example, among others. So this is an example of an output submitted on Turnitin. No? This is a master's thesis. Tapos tingnan ninyo yung mga naka-highlighted na mga passages, they are flagged by Turnitin as potentially similar. Tapos may numbers dyan, no? For example, si billion persons, approximately 15% of the population, may pink siya na highlight. Tapos may 20 na numbers sa taas niya. Tapos if you click that, ilalagay niyo kung saan yung potentials, ang source na potentially similar siya, no? So if we can take a look, meron din siyang limitations. So for example, yung number 3. In the Philippines, disability is defined as tapos naka-direct quotation definition of disability. Although naka-direct quotation na siya, dinetect rin siya as potentially similar. No? So aside from the quantitative measure na ilalabas ng Turnitin, for example, sasabihin niya na 30% similar, important din na may qualitative assessment, properly cited naman, no? Directly quoted naman, pero dinetect niya pa rin as potentially similar. No? So it's important to note na walang cut-off, no, na kapag sinabing 55% similar plagiarized yan, wag natin i-accept. No? Kaya 10% okay lang yan. No? So meron pa rin qualitative evaluation after the quantitative numerical result na ilalabas ng software. So what are the recommendations? Some recommendations to avoid plagiarism. Number 1, cite. No? If you're not sure if that thing is common knowledge or some new novel idea, just cite. No? Just cite. You can't go wrong with citing. No? Tapos, meron ding role ang ating mga supervisors at institutional level, no? Guidance from the mentors to the junior researchers. And of course, institutions should make sure that the researchers are trained in research integrity, for example. No? Finally dito, last line before publication, editors, reviewers, no? They should use your own judgment as well, no? Aside from just the numerical results of the plagiarism detection software. No? So a simple recap, no? So balikan natin yung case, these are the points. No? So Alfredo shared the project, no? Gusto niyang i-pursue as independent researcher. Tapos pag 1 year later, sabi ni Alfredo, nalaman ni Alfredo na Smith was doing something na mukhang sa kanya. No? In fact, na-present niya na sa conference. Tapos Alfredo feels like he should contact Smith, no? And claim authorship. So let's discuss a little bit. No? So did Smith commit plagiarism? No? Case in short, more information needed, no? Kailangan pa natin kausapin yung dalawang persons na yun, no? So maybe if Smith misrepresented an idea that is not his, no? Or maybe not, this could be an issue of irresponsible authorship practices which will be discussed by the next speaker, no? More than plagiarism. Number two, ano kayong factors that have contributed to this situation? Maybe walang authorship practices na set, no, at the institution. Hindi clear yung institution what constitutes authorship. No? O kaya at the individual level, iba-iba sila ng paniniwala. No? And pwedeng walang training din ang institution regarding authorship. And finally, what could they have done to prevent this situation from occurring? No? So consult guidelines, consult relevant resources such as the Committee on Publication Ethics or yung HOPE, or the Office of Research Integrity of the institution, so that's UP Manila ORI. No? And we clarify the roles and responsibilities, which will be discussed by the next speaker as well regarding credit statement, for example. Tapos meron ding internal audit to check na baka yung person na to or persons involved, baka may problematic behavior talaga sila na kailangan silang kausapin. No? So that is all. Thank you very much. Good day. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Professor Hinugin, no, for sharing your thoughts about them and especially kung ano yung mga root causes, no, so that we can really prevent those. Kaya medyo gusto ko po yung suggestion po ng UCLA Library how to prevent plagiarism daw. Ang sabi nila, 1, do not procrastinate. 2, be mindful of your notes kasi baka nangopya na tayo, no? 3, cite your sources. 4, practice good paraphrasing. And 5th, use your plagiarism checkers. No? So hopefully, magamit po natin ang mga yon. Our next speaker, again, one of the busiest members of the Office of Research Integrity. No? Pag nagmi-meeting kami, umaapaw po ang kanyang mga ideas, no? To talk about authorship. Please indulge me to introduce a little bit more about Dr. Jean Ann Toral, my co-moderator, who is professor at the University of the Philippines, Manila. She is an attending obstetrician, gynecology, medical specialist of the Philippine General Hospital, where she is also the coordinator for research and the chief of the PGH Expanded Hospital Research Office, or ERO. She is a fellow of Philippine Obstetrical and Gynecological Society and the Society of Gynecologic Oncologists of the Philippines, and also a certified colposcopist and fellow of the Philippine Society of Cervical Pathology and Colposcopy. Once again, please a warm round of applause to Dr. Jean Ann Toral.
So good morning once again. So I'll be talking about authorship. So Kevin related the story of Alfredo and Smith, and somehow there is also an authorship issue in that, no? Okay, so so this is the outline of my talk, no? So we'll define who is an author. Then I'll give you some examples of inappropriate authorship. Then we'll talk about the transition from authorship to contributorship. And lastly, I would enumerate some ways to promote integrity in scientific publications. Okay, so let me relate this story. No? So these are the discoverers of insulin. No? And the one on your left is that original manuscript which came out in the Canadian Medical Association Journal back in 1922. So more than a century ago. And the authors were Banting, Best, and Collip, plus the two others. So Banting was the one who persisted with the idea that the pancreas contained a substance that would decrease sugar levels or regulate blood sugar. And then it was Best who devised the initial crude method of extracting that insulin, while Collip refined the extraction process. While two others, ay hindi lumalabas, no? Sorry, ayan. Just watch or oversaw the administration of the insulin to the 14-year-old Leonard Thompson. So who is missing? No? Very notably missing is MacLeod, who was at the time the head of the University of Toronto's Department of Physiology, and he gave his all-out support to the project, no, both morally, emotionally, and financially. And later on, the following year, Banting and MacLeod were awarded the Nobel Prize for the discovery of insulin. So you would see that there could also be some authorship issues even a century ago. And one of the editors of CMAJ in 2000 said, would this kind of authorship line up agree with the present ICMJE criteria for authorship? But of course, I don't know if it shows, no, but MacLeod and two other participants in the group were acknowledged at the end of the paper for their contribution. Okay, so who is an author? So the four criteria is set out by the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, or ICMJE, and this version is still active, no, up to now, no. The latest version is actually May 2022, and these are the four criteria. First, there should be substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work, or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for the work. The second is drafting the work or revising it critically for important intellectual content. And final approval of the version to be published. There has to be, all authors should agree to this. And last, there should be agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. And these criteria are intended to ensure that contributors who have made substantial intellectual contributions to a paper are given credit as authors, and authors take the responsibility and are responsible for what is published. So that definition actually started way back in 1979 when a group of medical journal editors just convened informally that what they wanted was just to come up with standardized guidelines for submitting to their journals, and they were then called the Vancouver Group. So that was just how it started. But the first guidelines on authorship came 6 years later in 1985, and the first three of the criteria was set forth then. Then it was only in the year 2000 when it was stated or emphasized that all the three should be present. No? For you to be called an author, you should have fulfilled all three criteria. And it was only in 2013 when the responsibility to stand by to the integrity of the entire work became part of the definition. And so thus the four definitions of who is an author is what is now, no, up to this present time. Okay, so the two attributes of authorship, we have on the one hand credit, and on the other hand responsibility and accountability. So according to ICMJE, authorship is matters. No, why? Because it confers credit. It makes you, let's say in an academic institution, it can be your basis for promotion. It has also a social aspect. No, you become popular when you have many researches, and then also some kind of financial reward because there are publication awards. But of course, what comes with credit is also responsibility and accountability. Okay, and since authorship and publications are important measures of research productivity for scientists across disciplines, this has led to some abuse, leading to inappropriate authorship. And this is a very good description of this inappropriate authorship. So we remember the 3 Gs, no? So guest, gift, and ghost. So what is a guest author? So it's the practice of including influential names in one's paper in an attempt to bias the perceptions of the editor, reviewer, and the reader towards the validity of the work. Then you have also the gift, no? So the practice of naming seniors as authors even when they do not fulfill the criteria for authorship. Now, some have guidelines like all chairs of departments should be included, etc. So, and if they did not fulfill the criteria for authorship, that's gift. And then you also have the ghost authorship, which is the practice of either leaving out the person who has done a major chunk of the presented work, let's say, for example, a junior colleague or a student, or omitting persons who have significantly contributed as authors but would not like to be named as part of it. So that's ghost authorship. Okay, so to be able to understand better why authorship is becoming a difficult issue, we have to see the authorship trends. No? So back in the 1930s, the usual average, the norm is more of sole authorship, and the average collaborators are just 2. But come the 1970s, there's the growth of multiple authorship, and then there's also the academic reward system, and there's an ease of collaboration because of the internet age. And at the turn of the century, the average number of authors in high impact medical journals is as much as 7. There's more interdisciplinary collaboration, and there are other forms of scholarly output. And as the average number of authors on scientific articles grows, authorship-related problems ranging from disputes to outright misconduct mount. No? So we are already in that age that we collaborate a lot. That's why authorship really becomes an important issue. Okay, so the first a radical call to the concept of authorship and making it contributorship came from Drummond Rennie. He's actually an American physicist who used to be the deputy editor for JAMA. And it was his group who made the first call, no? So what did he write in their special communication? He wanted he argued for the conceptual and systematic change, no, to reflect the realities of multiple authorship and to buttress accountability. So they wanted to drop authorship and instead use contributorship. So what were their proposals? So the ones on your left are those for accountability, while the ones on the right side of the screen are on contribution. So the first one is the job-centered approach. So this is the accurate system that discloses accountability, no? So disclose what each person has actually done in the project. Then the second one is the concept of having a guarantor. So the guarantor is that person who have added efforts to ensure the integrity of the projects. So it's probably the guarantor is the modern day corresponding author. And then you also have the disclosure to the reader, no? So the contributors list and the byline, which should have been discussed by the authors themselves before getting published. And on the left are those about contributions. So there should be accurate description of the contributions. So and the order of contributors will have to be talked about early on in the project, or even just at the conception level. This has to be already talked about. And usually, of course, the one with the most contribution will come out as the first in the list of the bylines. Okay. So after that call, many journals already had the contributions of the authors listed already, no? But 15 years later from that first call, this group of authors still thought that we are still not getting the appropriate contributions of each of the authors in a particular research work. So why not, their question is, why not come up with a system that can capture the true nature of the underlying collaboration more precisely to capture who did what. So thus came credit taxonomy. So credit taxonomy is it stands for Contributor Roles Taxonomy. It's a high-level taxonomy including 14 roles that can be used to represent the roles typically played by contributors to research output. It's 14, but it still is not exhaustive, no? I don't know if this slide will show at the back, no? But some of the roles that can be included as contribution to a particular work include conceptualization. So that's idea formulation, the methodology, then the software design, validation. So that's coming up with studies on reproducibility of the research output, then a formal analysis including statistical, mathematical, and computational techniques, investigation, so that's data and evidence collection, data curation, so management of the data, writing the original draft, writing and reviewing and editing the final paper, then visualization, that's preparation, creation, and presentation of the published work, then supervision, as well as project administration, and even funding acquisition. So those are the 14 items. Again, as I said, it's quite a lot, but still not exhaustive. So many of the big publishing groups would have their own authorship guidelines and policies. And before you even submit to them, you have to check on their authorship guidelines. Nature in particular adheres to Marsha McNutt's transparency guidelines. So I'm introducing another term, transparency. So this, Marsha McNutt is an American geophysicist who once served as editor-in-chief for Nature and was the president of the National Academy of Sciences. So their group talked about transparency in authors' contributions and responsibilities to promote integrity in scientific publication. So they had items for journals, for research institutions like us, and then also for professional societies. So what do they have? Now, for journals, it includes setting standards for authorship, so they still follow the ICMJE criteria. And then journals should provide expectations for corresponding authors. So I'll have a separate slide about the role of corresponding authors. And then, of course, committing to the use of the credit taxonomy and requiring, it doesn't show na pala doon sa dulo, authors to adopt ORCID IDs and other standard identifiers. So ORCID is a group of stakeholders in research. It gives you a unique number, a persistent identifier that you as a researcher own and control. So hindi ka pwedeng mapapagkamalan for somebody else because you have a unique ORCID number. With regard to research institutions, universities and research institutions should develop, post, distribute, and regularly review and update their policies on authorship in consultation with researchers. That's why the Office of Research Integrity, its project for this year is coming up with authorship guidelines for UP Manila. And for scientific societies, through their editorials in their journals, special sessions at meetings, and policies in their own publishing journals, they should be able to promote transparency in the scientific publication. Okay, so this is my slide regarding corresponding authors. So what are the roles of the corresponding author? First, to ensure that all listed authors have approved the manuscript before submission and that all authors receive the submission and all substantive correspondence with the editors. And all manuscripts, full reviews, and materials are ensured to comply with the transparency, reproducibility standards, and best practices of both the field and the journal. Third is The corresponding author must reveal as appropriate whether the manuscript benefited from the use of editorial services. No? So there are many editorial services already. No? So like Walter's Kluwer, so some examples and of that. And usually the journals would say that. And then fourth, must indicate whether any authors on earlier versions have been removed or new authors added and why. And ensure that all authors have certified the author list and contribution distribution, which are expressed accurately. So this is just an example of a paper which I was part of the authorship. No? So Michelle Ann Ayala is actually a young doctor, 25 younger than me. She convened our group to come up with this paper on geographic distribution of cancer care providers in the Philippines. So she's actually the corresponding author, and she did all the work of the corresponding author. This came out in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. So that's why she's also the first author. And she made the most substantial contribution for this paper. And of course, here, the author contributions are specified what we exactly did, no? So nakasulat dyan sa end of the paper. And those who did not fulfill the criteria for authorship based on ICMJE, but did something for the paper were acknowledged, no? So yung nag-generate ng figures for this study was actually acknowledged in the paper. So this is another example. So this is actually an ovarian cancer group, no? So all their names are written, but you can see for the desktop 3 investigators. So it can also be that way, no? So the group is acknowledged or is written in the bylines for a particular work, and then at the end part are also the acknowledgements. So this is another one. So this is the paper of Dr. Cecilia Llave together with her group, and this was funded also by the PATH by a German group. So hindi siya nag-appear dito, but their collaborators from the USA were also included in the list of contributors. Of course, Dr. Cecilia Llave is the corresponding author in this case. So I was part of this study. I participated in one of the focus group discussions. That's why my name is written, but I'm not an author. I was just acknowledged for my part in the study. Okay. Okay. So because of the possible manipulation of authorship, there has to be governance on it. Sorry, napuputol yung iba. So at the level of the self, you have to ask yourself, do I qualify as an author? So you have the ICMJE criteria to guide you. And then for publishers and journals, so you have the author qualification. You also have the credit taxonomy as well as Marcia McNutt's recommendation. While for institutions like us, Marcia McNutt also has recommendations with regard to authorship policies as far as research institutions are concerned. But I found this interesting article from Canada, the group of Cook, who made recommendations as to how to avoid authorship disputes. No? So this is this publication, 10 strategies for avoiding and overcoming authorship conflicts in academic publishing. So these are actually the 10. Sorry na puputol yung iba, but let me just read through them. No? So initiating discussions about authorship expectations early. No? So once you're forming the group, you're pursuing a research, you have to already talk about authorship. It's not when the time you are about to publish, it's the only time that you will talk about authorship. So one of the reasons why there are disputes is that there is inadequate discussion at the start. So in first one on the left. The second is consulting guidelines, but don't be constrained by them. No? So there are many guidelines, the COP, Council of Publishing Editors, and then you have the Council of Sciences. Madaming guidelines, but this this will serve as guidelines to help you, and what the guidelines want or emphasize actually are best practices. Although there are also some items in the guidelines of how to address certain disputes wherever they are. No, kasi walang silver bulletproof na magsasabi ng lahat ng paano mo gagawin with regard to authorship disputes, no. So it cannot be a full guideline na may sagot sa bawat katanungan na mapupunta sa atin when there are authorship disputes. Then the third and the fourth come together, no? So documenting contributions and communicating frequently. So pwede kasing nagkakape lang kayo ng kaibigan mo, napag-usapan kayo sa habang nagkakape kayo ng isang research project. Ano ba 'yon? Kasama na ba 'yon? So those are the things, no, that you need to see, you need to write, no? So this is a document that you have to keep so that your contributions to a particular project will all be logged on, and you will always be able to go back to those when there are authorship disputes. And then that includes also the transparency, no? And then the fifth is responsible inclusion. Here we introduce equitable versus so equity ba, or pwede bang equality, pare-pareho lang kayo ng contribution, or is it equitable? You base it on what you actually contributed to a particular project. So, and what they want is responsible inclusion. Ayaw mo naman nung gatekeeping na you keep the others away so they will not be promoted or something like that, or you don't want to include them, or ayaw mo din naman ng bukas na bukas yung gate kasi baka naman tokenship na yung nangyari kahit hindi siya kasama sa authorship, dapat sinasama mo. So it has to be responsible inclusion based on equity. And then number 6 is valuing diverse contributions. It's good that there is already credit taxonomy. So that will serve as a guide. Pwede ba siyang, of course, andun yung contribution, but you have to check again with ICMJE whether he or she qualifies as an author, even if he or she had a contribution. So whoever doesn't fit into the authorship criteria will have to be acknowledged at the end of the paper. And then 7th is considering contributions to be intellectual property. So let's say, for example, I came in, I had developed this questionnaire. When I go to a research group and then my questionnaire will be used, what happens to the intellectual property? So it has to be a summative item all the time, no? So I still own that, but I give it to the group. So dapat there will be more outputs after after your questionnaire was used, for example, or for example a device that you invented. So intellectual property also has many things to be talked about when let's say, for example, from an individual and then becoming a part of a group. And then seeking external input, no? So at times you cannot come up with a solution to the authorship problem, then you either ask for a mediator, so mediate kayo kasama yung mga arguing parties, or you can have an arbitrator, so hindi kasama ang mga people in dispute and they'll be the ones to decide. And then number 9 here is realizing that authorship norms vary and some perspectives are ingrained. So different cultures, different specialties, pwedeng iba-iba yung dala nilang ways of thinking, and you have to also respect those. And the last one here, sorry, it doesn't show there, be aware of power differential. So this is where, student teacher relationships would come in, kasi there is in some institutions, may academic bullying, so the students should know their rights also when it comes to their works, as students being part of a bigger group, for example, in a university. So these are the possible reasons for disputes, inadequate discussion, no guidelines, no records, secrecy, gatekeeping, then the power imbalance, and how do you resolve these 10 items are the recommendations of the group of Cook. So those are my key messages, no? So authorship in research, comes with credit, which is always accompanied by responsibility and accountability to ensure the integrity of the scientific work. And then second is authorship is prone to integrity issues, so misconducts, especially with the norm of collaboration. And last, there are certain principles, guidelines, and mechanisms to help avoid conflicts in authorship at various levels. So at the self, so you ask, are you qualified as an author? The publisher, the institution, and scientific societies. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Doc Jean, for informing us about these authorship guidelines. And so for those who actually type their questions on Zoom, we will find a way to answer those. So tamang-tama lang po na may nagtanong na how do we detect predatory journals? No? So yan po ang susunod nating topic, no, with Dr. Joanna Orejola, who is an associate professor at the College of Pharmacy and the chairman of the College Research Committee. She graduated with a degree in pharmacy and completed her master's in biochemistry from the University of the Philippines, Manila. She obtained a Doctor of Philosophy in Pharmaceutical Science, Natural Products Chemistry at the Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences, Nagasaki University. A round of applause po to Dr. Joanna Orejola.
And so good morning for today. I will be talking about predatory journals and conferences. And this talk is based actually on a full report by the Inter-Academy Partnership, or IAP, entitled Combating Predatory Academic Journals and Conferences. So this lecture is, I made it in memory of Dr. Marilyn Balolong, who previously gave this lecture on the education caravan on previous lecture series. Okay, this will be the flow of my discussion for today. Ayan. Parang iba yung nagpro-project. It's delayed. Delayed po siya. Dapat na delayed po yung ano. Okay. Ayan. Okay, so bakit yan? May sarili siyang utak. Ayan, so this will be the flow of my discussion. First, I will define, ko na lang po. We'll define the spectrum and discuss the spectrum of predatory practices and growth and prevalence of predatory journals and conferences. And then we will also talk about the perspective of researchers. So this paper actually focused also on, they conducted a survey on more than 1,000 researchers to get their perspective about predatory practices. And then they also proposed, or they enumerated existing tools and proposed interventions to combat predatory practices. And then they also identified the systemic drivers of predatory practices, and lastly, their recommendations and conclusion. Okay. So for the definition and spectrum of predatory practices, Saan po talaga? Okay. Ayan. So, based on the 2019 paper in Nature, predatory journals are defined as predatory journals and publishers or entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship and are characterized by false or misleading information, deviation from best editorial and publication practices, a lack of transparency, and or the use of aggressive and indiscriminate solicitation practices. Okay. So, yung term talaga na predatory is somewhat questionable by the authors kasi some authors actually or some researchers actually deliberately engage in this activity. So even if they are aware that the predatory that journals are indeed predatory, they still intend to publish in these journals. And originally, ayan, pag sinabing predatory journals, kasi ang prey talaga supposedly ay yung researchers. Kasi ang perception doon ay yung researchers hindi nila alam na predatory pala yung journal. So hence the term. But many other countries came up with iba-iba yung definition nila sa predatory journal. May iba't iba silang term for that. Okay. And ito na lang. Okay. So instead of prey and predator, ayan, parang nag-advance po. Ayan. So yung original ay yung researcher talaga yung prey, but actually, ayan, looking back, it's not actually the researchers who are considered as the prey. Rather, it's the research itself and the research users who are more considered as the prey in this case, more than the researchers themselves. Okay. And so they actually said that the term is problematic. Okay? So it's not actually a universally agreed or recognized term, as different countries came up with their own, like dubious journals and fraudulent journals, etc. And then they said that the relationship is less of a predatory prey, and it's more of a new and ugly symbiosis. Yeah. And the term is actually insufficiently nuanced and poorly defined, as it fails to distinguish between deceptive and fraudulent journals or conferences and low-quality outlets that might willingly disregard academic norms or be well-intentioned. So it actually cannot distinguish between yung mga starting pa lang, well-intentioned pero hindi pa sila established. So yun yung difference with the term. Kasi usually sila, yung mga bago-bagong journals pa lang or publisher, parang base sa mga alam nating characteristics ngayon ng predatory journals, mukha silang may predatory na characteristics. Yan. And some high-quality journals or conferences with questionable practices can also have these predatory behaviors as well. And with that, ayan, another example with predatory journals, halimbawa yung Bill's List, I think many of us are already familiar with Bill's List. This became problematic, kaya hindi maganda yung definition lang. And so si Bill's List, naglabas siya ng list ng mga journals na considered as problematic. However, the downside of this list, kaya na-take down na rin siya, it's because it's biased towards open access journals. So generalize niya lahat ng open access journal, and he himself admitted that there's also an unclear criteria for determining predatory journals. Ayan. And so it's more advisable to instead present or detect spectrum of predatory behaviors rather than coming up with a black and white term of predatory or not, or good or bad journals. So similar to sa mga nabanggit na kanina po na about predatory behaviors then, ayan. And here, we can see that the fraudulent to quality journals, fraudulent being the high risk, having a predatory behavior versus yung low risk, of course, yung mga quality journals. And each of this, so for example, for fraudulent to deceptive, there are different markers for each, which can give guides to the authors, no? On whether the journal that they wanted to publish, meron ba siyang characteristic ng pagiging predatory. The same is true with predatory conferences. So meron din siyang, instead of defining it as whether predatory or not, the researchers are enjoined to instead look for the typical markers so that they can be guided and they can decide whether they have to attend this journal after having identified that based on these markers, the journal is indeed low risk, or the conferences is indeed low risk for behavior, have low risk or tendency to behave as a predatory conference. And later on, the authors also provided a list of tools showing yung guidelines, ayan, for the authors to see kung, or to check kung predatory nga or not yung journal. So these guidelines or tools are actually based also in this spectrum of predatory behaviors. And okay, so what differentiates, or why, what or when do we consider actually a behavior to be somewhat predatory? Ayan, is if it ay umiikot ng gusto. Okay. So dapat po talaga 'yon, ayan. Dapat yung mas lamang yung pera. Ayan. So hindi ko po alam, hindi na-appreciate yung animation ko dito. Ayan. So what I want to say here is yung scientific rigor po na thrown from the picture, giving way to, syempre po, profit-driven kasi ang mga predatory journals and conferences. So yun talaga yung main factor. So na e-echipwera po yung scientific rigor, yung research itself, kasi ang napaprioritize or yung talaga reason for having these conferences is more of the profit behind it. Okay, so the growth and prevalence of predatory journals and conferences. So they acknowledge this growth, and it started at about, hindi na po nakikita sa slide, about mid-90s nung unang na-recognize yung existence ng predatory journals. And as we can see on the latest slide, so yung latest year talaga po is 2018, yung data na to. And we can see that almost half of the existing na mga journals in the different disciplines would tend to have predatory counterparts. Okay, so ano na po siya. Ngayon, actually may isang study din nagsabing na outnumber na nga ng predatory, at least ng predatory conferences, ang legitimate na mga scientific conferences. Okay. So studies revealed that there are at least, in 2020, there are at least 13,000 predatory journals worldwide. Ang dami na po pala. Ayan. And then 11,873 of the predatory journals increased in publication volume, at least from 53,000 to 420,000. And then in the Cabell's predatory reports, as of January 2022, there are 15,574 predatory journals with around 150 journals added per month over the past 3 years. And then in 2020, ayan, about 2/3 of predatory journals originate from Asia and Africa, predominantly in these 3 countries. And in this paper by Makacek and Schrolek, which was actually retracted then, ayan, they found out that the newly rich countries, such as the Arabic countries, are now easy prey for predatory journals. And in fact, 17 of the top 20 countries our academics are publishing in predatory journals and come from the paano po tanggalin tong yung X. They come from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation or yung OIC. Ayan. So kaya na-retract kasi medyo controversial yung paper nila. Okay. Ayan. Now this is not only happening in the Asian countries, even in Europe and the Americas. This is also felt as a problem, yung predatory journals. So for example, even in the US, 6% published in predatory journals with even senior academics involved. So there's an early perception na early career scientists lang or researchers ang usual na prey, but no, they found out na even career scientists would still engage in or would still publish in predatory journals. And in Cable's predatory reports database, usually, dun sa lahat ng identified the predatory journals, 1/3 come from the medical disciplines. And in the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, they found out that it is widespread in biomedicine, medical, and dental sciences. Okay. And unfortunately, they found out that about 3% also crept into leading indexes and databases. So further diminishing yung way natin to distinguish between a legitimate journal and the predatory journal. Ayan. And medical sector din, isa din sa factor ay pag yung mga companies sa conferences naman may gusto silang i-promote na na product nila, minsan sila pa tong nag-i-engage din or nagko-collaborate with the predatory publishers. And one example of an identified organizer ng predatory conferences is the World Academy of Science, Engineering, and Technology. So this is identified by one of the websites where you can identify or which gives a list of predatory conferences and journals, yan si predatorypublishing.com. And it lists over 300 locations of planned conferences from April 20 to December 2022. Ayan, so yung isang reason kung bakit napagkakamalang legitimate din itong mga predatory conferences is because they are being held in a known city, tourist attraction. Kasi minsan mapapaisip ka, predatory siguro yan kung nasa not known location. So yun yung nakita nila ngayon, okay, why not hold this event in a known location? And sufficing to say, there are, this actually gained a revenue of $4.5 million yung holding ng mga conferences na predatory in nature. And in the 2017 study by Grove and colleagues, they found out that predatory conferences actually outnumbered real conferences. And the main causes would be yung systemic incentives at least sa academe, yung again yung ating pressure sa mga researchers to publish or present, no, sa mga journals. And the other one, yung hindi po nakikita, yung mga incentives po, minsan yung mga sa abroad, yung mga cities na nag-host ng mga conferences na to, may incentives sila from their local government kapag nakapag-host sila ng isang conference or journal, kasi sure na magbo-boost yung tourism, no? Ayan. So okay, so for my next slide, ayan. So familiar siguro kayo doon sa mga expectation versus reality, no, ng mga meme. Ayan. So kagaya po niyan. Okay, so ang topic kasi natin ay yung veneer of legitimacy naman. Okay, so why do some experienced or career scientists still fall for these predatory conferences? Kasi nga they are so manicured such that sa advertisement we thought that it is legitimate. Okay? So for example, some would bill Nobel Prize winners or high-profile figures in their programs, but in fact, when you attend the conference, wala naman pala, hindi naman pala mag-a-attend. Okay? And another reason, ayan, not only are high-profile figures billed, sometimes there are also well-established academics and even some institutions that will support these predatory conferences. With them, we don't know whether they do not know that they're dealing with predatory publishers. So that is yet to be established. And then there's also yung usual din na exploit ng mga predatory predatory conference organizers is yung pag-host ng transdisciplinary na type ng mga conferences. Tapos meron lang silang mga vague na topics such as communications. Pero they can host yung inag-invite sila ng speaker na from, let's say, microbiology, tapos yung sobrang layo like anthropology na, yung mga ganon. So pag ganon po yung yung mga nature, minsan may characteristic siya na parang leaning towards may pagka-predatory. Ang problem lang with that is meron mga legitimate na disciplinary sana na conferences na nadadamay sila sa mga ganong practice ng predatory organizers. Now, what would be the impact on research of such predatory journals and conferences? Of course, one would be a contamination of research literature. So I placed there question mark kasi may ibang mga authors, ayan, usually yung mga nasa Western Europe countries, ayan, they said that hindi naman talaga makakontaminate sa literature kasi daw yung mga na-publish naman sa journals na ganito ay less likely daw na masasite din. So yun ang opinion nila, where in fact it's not what the study revealed eventually. Okay? And with this, ayan, yung pag-publish sa mga predatory journals, ayan, it can lead to loss of new knowledge kasi there may be legitimate na very good result ng isang study and yet minalas na nag-publish si researcher sa isang predatory journal na walang gustong mag-cite. Ayan. So with that, ayan, pwedeng nawala na yung new knowledge. And then it's also a waste of research time and resources and people and materials in particular. And it can also lead, of course, to tarnish reputation of researchers and the institution. Okay? And it can lead also to disillusionment of research mentees, especially if the students are already aware of the concept of predatory journals and conferences. Pag yung nila, advisor nila ay biglang nag-publish sa predatory journal. So, syempre, mata-turn off sila. Okay. And it can also provide easy route for untrustworthy science o yung ibang mga pseudosciences or yung mga made-up sciences. For example, itong journal dito, it can look like something that is legitimate na discipline, scientific discipline, where in fact it's not. Okay? So, I can speak this in as a natural product scientist, so hindi siya legitimate talaga na scientific discipline. Para lang siyang astrology, parang ganun din. Para kasi siyang ano lang, nandoon siya sa alternative na mga klase ng sciences, yun nga, yung pseudoscience. And it also hampers efficiency, impact, and diversity of research process, including dilution of research. Okay, so ito, hindi ko na-discuss in full detail. What I just wanted to point out is even for papers that are published in a reputable journal, they can still have a public, they can still have an impact on public policy. So as public policies may be made using non-peer-reviewed or non-quality assured research. So, pag ano kasi, syempre pag mga journalists, ganyan na wala namang scientific background, when they get access to these predatory journals, they cannot tell kung predatory yan. Okay? So, lalo na pag maganda yung itsura ng predatory journal, they would also think that the study published in that are legitimate. And so, they can use this yan, sa mga news nila, and then it can already spread of false information. So magkakascade na yan ng event. So as explained earlier ni Sir Jojo, ayan, yung even though na-retract na yung article, yung effect niya hindi nawawala kasi matagal, it's been 12 years before siya na-retract. Okay? So my point here is that pag yan ay predatory journal, we often do not see any predatory journal being retracted kasi walang nag-e-effort na i-double check yung mga study nila. Kasi yun yung pinakamalaking loophole nila in the first place, peer review. Walang matinong peer review ang predatory journals. And so this may lead eventually to erosion of public trust and loss of support for evidence-based policy, which we are witnessing nowadays, no? Lalo na with the example with the anti-vaxxers. Ayan. And ang ano pa dito, delikado, kasi yung mga healthcare professions, yung mga nilalabas nilang guideline on treatment, etc., they rely on what is published, but what they have talked about in the conferences. So, kapag may nakapasok doon ng mga reviewed na mga journals, delikado po siya. Ayan. So, about the impact on economy, of course, hindi lang sa researcher, hindi lang sa public, yung impact ng pagpapublish dito sa mga predatory journals and conferences. So, it can also lead to cause of loss of research money. No? So, hindi lang research money ang na-loss natin. We can also, may nasayang ding oras, human resources, at saka yung emotional investment ng mga researcher doon sa study. And just to show you here, an example of yung mga wastage. Ayan. For example, even the simple as management ng email spams with these predatory journals, it had already cost about 2.6 billion US dollars. Kasi yung ibang mga institute, they even invest for anti-scam technology. Ayan. And with this, they're saying na kung napunta yung pera na yon sa pag-i-invest sa mga peer reviewers, mas nakapag-produce pa tayo ng matinong papers. Then even with article publishing processing charges, And so a lot of these predatory journals would, of course, charge the authors, and not maybe as high as those of established journals, but still kumita sila so far, and based dito sa study na 2015, $74 million yung kinita nila sa pagsingil through APC. Okay? And a cost of conduct of research, the other costs that are not tangible, which are deemed priceless, ay yung lives of animals lost during the study, human lives put at risk, and the betrayal of public trust. Okay. So the authors of this report also highlighted some of the effect of COVID-19 on research and publication. And we have all seen this unprecedented increase in scope of topics and rate of publication and scale of information. And dahil dun sa sa bilis ng mga pangyayari, ayan, hindi na minsan na-check, double-check. Minsan may mga studies dito na may poor choice of research question, questionable quality of study design and conduct. And these are all reported sa mga journals. And what happens is that it can lead to waste of resources, distort decision-making of those who wanted to put this in policy, and it also distort public perception. Okay? So here, ayan, hindi na po nakita yung nakasulat sa baba. Ayan, so it's obvious with this practice, maraming predatory journals yung nag-feed dito sa, sumabay sila sa confusion ng mga tao. Okay? So yung impact naman ng COVID-19 on predatory conferences ay merong nag-promote, meron namang nag-hinder din. Okay, so they are not saying na lahat promotion lang ng predatory practices. And then the authors also came up with this stakeholders map showing sino yung mga dapat involved in combating predatory journals and conferences. And based on the research that they conducted on about 1,872 researchers, hindi na po nakikita dyan, and about 80% perceive predatory practices as a very serious problem in their country. And shown here in this slide, yung especially sa African nations, sila yung pinaka nababahala doon sa problem ng predatory journals. Okay? Whereas yung nasa Americas naman, sila naman, they see it as it's becoming a problem. Whereas in Europe, ayan, sila yung highest that think that this is not a problem. Okay? So they found out that regarding sa factors that would tend to engage with predatory journals, they said that experienced researchers perceive prevalence of predatory journals as less pronounced. But they also found out that it's also these experienced researchers who have less flexible with their views compared to less experienced researchers. And here they pointed out kaya important na yung training about raising the awareness about predatory journals should start doon sa mga early career researchers. Then 1/4 of those respondents actually admitted to having published in journal of predatory behavior, and a majority of them admitted they were not aware during the time that they published. And surprisingly, meron diyang umamin, more than half of them responded that they needed it to advance their career. Ayan. So there are likelihood of publishing to these predatory journals are similar to the reasons explained earlier. Again, yung kagaya ng pressure to publish for promotions purposes and to get their PhD, at least for the students. Okay? And so yun yung mga contributing factors, yung being in a low and middle income countries and being in a transdisciplinary or engineering discipline. And they've also clarified that gender and career stage are not contributing factors to propensity to publish in these journals. So here they presented different tools and interventions to combat predatory practices. So one is to expose or stigmatize these practices, such as watch lists and efforts of self-organized research committees, train researchers so they can avoid practices, and apply regulations to create disincentivize, such as the national institutional policies. And then last, setting principles of transparency. Okay? So yung mga examples na ng mga moves that expose these predatory journals and conferences, again, yan dyan ulit yung bills list, and then yung website, thepredatorypublishing.com, which is anonymously run, ayan, but it's also free website. And then, ito naman yung paywalled, yung Cabell's predatory reports, which provides safe list. So, I tried, ayan, so yan yung sample na page nila, pero you cannot go further kasi may bayad. Ay, sige po, I will cut this lang. Okay? Ayan, so this may be the most problematic, this is the most prominent but the most problematic for intervention. Okay? Ayan, then avoiding, ito yung sinabi ko kanina, the tools that they provide so that you can use this checklist, use this website as a checklist before you attend to a conference or publish in a journal. Okay? Now, in the Philippine setting, wala talaga tayong matinong policy about predatory journals. But what I saw, at least sa PCHRD, they do not provide publication funding, parang publication grant, to those who have published in predatory journal. Now in UP, we don't have policies, but we have this mga guidelines na indicated sa atin sa memo, and even in the UP faculty manual. Okay? So still they are just guidelines, hindi po sila hindi sila description lang, but not really a guideline. Okay? And then there are already agencies that set standard for journals and conferences. Unfortunately, despite the presence of this, ganun pa rin, marami pa rin lumalabas sa mga predatory journals. Okay? So these are examples of directory in indexing services with journal standards. Okay? So yung magandang example din, yung mga Spanish and Portuguese speaking countries, dahil sa model ng manner nila ng pag-publish ng journals, which are mostly non-commercial, mostly academic, and not profit for nature. Okay? So the systemic drivers would be the following. Ayan, monetization, research evaluation, and challenges and weaknesses in peer review system. Okay, so ayan, yung research, yung predatory journals, actually ito, established open access journals dapat yan. Ayan, yung mga predatory journals kasi, they offer an alternative na mas mura na predatory, na APC, kasi mahal yung mga established journal na APC. So maniningil pa rin sila, pero mas murang halaga para kagatin siya ng mga researchers. Ayan. So these are examples of APC charges. And then their interventions would be yung open access or APCs should be subsidized. Yun yung parang gist lang dito. Okay. And then for evaluation and assessment na tayo din dito sa UP ginagawa natin to. Of course, yung mga standard, yung basis natin, yung researches, number of researches as basis for improvement of institutional ranking. So isa yan sa nagiging problem kung bakit nag-proceed yung quantity over quality ng researches. So here, the proposed intervention would be to focus on quality over quantity. And there should be change in policies, power structures, and entrenched norms and values. Okay? So meron namang mga organization ngayon na may move na i-improve ang research evaluation assessment in different countries. Okay. Then, about the weakness in peer review system, ayan, for each weaknesses, especially the lack of transparency during peer review, ito yung talagang sinasamantala ng mga predatory journals kasi there's no means of checking whether these journals indeed undergone peer review. Okay. Ayan. So, ayan, for conclusions and recommendations, so for current definitions of predatory and academic practices, they are inadequate. So instead, distinguish the spectrum of behaviors. And then another point taken is awareness and understanding of predatory practices and behaviors are generally pure. So deliver more targeted and robust training materials and resources at all levels of scholarship. And that predatory actors and outlets are becoming more sophisticated and fraudulent, journals can find their way into the trusted indexes. So avoid engaging with and legitimizing so-called predatory journals, publishers, and conferences. And for predatory journals and conferences impacting at least 1 million researchers and costing billions, you should raise awareness of predatory practices and create disincentives for researchers who use them. Then predatory journals and conferences risk becoming ingrained in research culture and institutionalized, and hence more research, but in this case, more research is required to understand the impacts of predatory practices at all levels. And then monetization and commercialization of academic research output help drive predatory practices and behaviors. And so with this, they can propose institution funding, agency, or government-supported fees for APCs. Okay? And then for contemporary research evaluation system, which are a major driver of predatory practices, reject the overuse on reliance on quantitative metrics in research evaluation and promote ways of recognizing research quality. And lastly, predatory practices exploit weakness in the peer review system due to lack of transparency. And so with this, they proposed and recommended to strengthen the institution of transparent peer review in academia through merit systems, policies, and support structures at all levels. So thank you for listening, and that would be all. I apologize for the long lecture.
All right, so thank you, Dr. Orejola, for that very comprehensive talk on predatory conferences. Now we will proceed to the discussion of cases, interactive case discussions, which will be facilitated by Dr. Christopher J. Robidillo, who is an associate professor of chemistry and biochemistry at the Department of Physical Sciences and Mathematics. He graduated with the degree of Bachelor of Science in Biochem, magna cum laude, from the University of the Philippines, Manila. He obtained his master's degree in chemistry from the National Tsinghua University in Hsinchu, Taiwan, and was a graduate chemistry researcher in the Research School of Chemistry at the Australian National University in Canberra, Australia. He obtained his PhD in chemistry and jointly from the University of Alberta in Canada and the Technical University of Munich in Germany. He is a peer reviewer of numerous journals. Dr. Rubidillo was recognized by the Royal Society of Chemistry as an outstanding reviewer for nanoscale and nanoscale advances. Your research interests are in the field of nanochemistry and bio-nanotechnology. Dr. Rubidilio, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And I appreciate my students who just needed to go out because they have class at 11:30. All right, so today after we have listened to the lectures of these speakers, we now have the opportunity to apply what we have learned. So this is an interactive case discussion. I have invited faculty, reactors, as well as there are still some remaining students here. So I'm hoping that the students will be able to air their opinion and participate in the discussion. Okay, so the first case is shown here. An assistant professor, the title is First or Second. An assistant professor is given 3 years to publish at least one research article as a first author in a reputable peer-reviewed journal to get tenured in a certain university. Assistant Professor Don T. Dewitt entered the university with a master's degree, but without a publication in January 2021. Don took in Dina Natuto, an undergraduate student, as a thesis advisee in January 2023. Don was a hands-on thesis advisor who micromanaged a lot. He directed every experiment that Dina performed and helped in troubleshooting all the problems that Dina faced during her thesis. Now, Dina obtained great results, which she and Don were able to write into a research article of high quality in November 2023. On the day of the submission of their manuscript, Don, to Dina's surprise, made himself the first author, while Dina just the second author. Now, Don told Dina that he needs a first author paper before 2023 ends to get tenure. Dina thought that it was unfair, but decided to let the matter drop anyway. So the question is, was Don right in making himself the paper's first author? That's the question. So I would like to invite students first. If there are some students who would like to participate, do you have any, is there anyone here in the audience who wants to participate? You can go to the microphone, approach the microphone in front of you. Okay, so he's approaching the door. So let me ask then the faculty reactors that I have kindly asked to be here. Okay, let's first begin with Professor Mishi Mishano from the Department of Arts and Communication. Ma'am, the microphone is there.
Hello, thank you. So I think Don is, so the question is, was he right in making himself the first author? Apparently he was not right in doing so. His partner was not satisfied. He felt, Dina Natuto, no, felt that it was unfair. Kasi he decided on his own, right? Tama po ba yung case details? He decided that on his own because he needed to be the first author in order to get tenure. So that is wrong. The decision on who gets to be the first author should clearly be a group decision. Another thing worth looking into is the power relationship between the two, kasi you have an advisor and an advisee. And in our country, the less powerful always choose to be silent about problems. Okay, so it's worth asking if si Dina ba ay natuto tungkol sa mga policy ng kanyang department regarding issues like these. In-inform ba siya? So baka naman she kept silent dahil hindi niya alam na meron palang mechanisms to address such issues. Tapos on the part of, parang from another perspective, pag yung institution naman na mag-grant ng tenure should also do its job by ensuring that that the reputation of Don is above reproach, that there are no complaints from people he worked with in the past. So I don't know if we do that, but perhaps it should be done kasi nagkakaroon nga ng mga ganitong kaso. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Nishi. So, Professor Michan is telling us that it should, a round of applause first, please. So Professor Michan is telling us that there should have been a discussion on or about authorship at the beginning or at the early stages of a research. Okay. Let's hear from Dr. Dalit, the chair of the Department of Biology, as to what he thinks. Is done right or no or not?
Okay, good morning to everyone. So I would like to thank Dr. Chris Vidilio for having me in this interactive case discussion. It is very important that authorship criteria should be agreed and or clarified by all investigators at an early stage of the research. So in this particular case, the 10-item recommendation of S.J. Cook to prevent authorship conflict is highly recommended, as cited by Dr. Tural in her talk earlier. And as indicated by the University of Cambridge Office of Research Integrity, where possible, it is advisable to keep written records of decisions regarding authorship, and this should be revisited where roles and contributions change over the life cycle of the study. Okay, so the criteria for determining who should be first author is not black and white. So the first author should be the first person who should be the person who contributed most to the work, including the writing of the manuscripts. These two scopes of work may have been achieved by more than one person. So hence determining who the first author of a paper should be can be difficult. Okay, in many cases, more than one paper results from a research. So the first author may be the same or different in each output. And this may be affected by factors such as the focus of the paper, who did the bulk of the work covered by that paper, who wrote or drafted the paper, and what investigators and authors agree upon. So an author needing a first authorship publication is not on the list of these factors, but may play a role in discussions. So from the details given in case 1 scenario, Don and Dina may not have discussed and agreed upon these matters prior to writing the paper, or they may have different interpretations of what was discussed. The need to be first author aside, Don was apparently highly involved in the conduct of the research, while Dina likely did the actual experimentation. However, it is not clear if the research was once started by Don, while Dina carried out a portion of the larger research, as in the case of a project leader allowing a student to work on one area of a funded research, or if the research was conceptualized by Dina and Don's participation was really just advisory and supervisory. Hence, from the details given, it is not clear if Don was right in making himself the first author. But definitely what is clear that they did not discuss this as they should have.
Thank you, Sir Jay. So Sir Jay is saying that, a round of applause first, please. So Sir Jay is saying that it's not clear whether, what is his name? Don was not right in making himself the first author or not. But what's clear was that they did not discuss authorship at the beginning or at the early stages of their research. And now I want to call on my mentor and advisor, Professor Dr. Nelson Villarante from the Department of Physical Sciences and Mathematics.
Hi. First, I would like to thank all the speakers and all the members of the ORI for bringing this interesting information to the college. Okay, so I have 3 minutes to react on this one. I have to read this to make it faster. Okay, so the order of authorship for publication of research output is one component and I don't know if I think the ORI will come up with a guideline, because I don't know if the university has a guideline on authorship. Okay, because the UPM Rev, I think, is focused on the three scenes, right? Okay, so credit of authorship has important academic, social, and financial implications, and therefore it should be bound by guidelines, okay? And which aid in preserving transparency during writing and publication of research material so as to prevent ethical violations. Okay. So collaborative research in academia is empirically assessed through co-authored publications. No? Unfortunately, no accepted standards exist for determining and handling the fair allocation of credit. Okay. So in academic institutions, it is very common that a professor, which is the advisor or is the advisor, and a graduating student are involved in collaborative research. The advisor guiding the student all throughout, inputting a lot of creative, intellectual, and substantial contributions to end up with a good research output that is publishable. Okay, so pressure exists to author research. Okay, because if the paper can be published in a reputable journal, this could influence advanced degree program acceptance or postdoc position on the part of the student, and promotion, merit pay, or award, no, for the professor. So in that case, no, has the professor committed ethical violation as the main author of the paper? Well, if we based it on most of the journal guidelines, as mentioned by Dr. Tural, okay, that substantial contributions, okay, should be given to the main author, okay, should have substantial contributions to the conception or the design of the work, or the collecting, analysis of data, and writing the manuscript, editing it until it is published. Then I think, okay, based on that, no, the professor did not commit ethical violation, no, if we base it on that guidelines. But again, to avoid disputes on authorship, there should be a clear guideline on this, or there should be a discussion at the start, no, of the project of who will be the main author of the manuscript. Okay, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So thank you so much. So Sir Nelson says that there's no violation, but there's clearly, again, no talk or no discussion at the beginning of the authorship. So I think that's what's clear here. They should have talked about the authorship early on in their engagement. So I would like to call Dr. Taral to at least give some, impart to us her opinion as to the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. No, you know, I'm not an expert really on authorship issues. I do lecture this, and and I've learned also from the readings I make. But as I mentioned earlier, there are no guidelines that can answer all the disputes that can occur. No, iba-iba yung situations. But what we want to for this case, no, I actually didn't know whether whenever you have a student na magti-thesis, did the research idea come from Don, or did it come from the student? Hindi, yung parang hindi clear dito. I don't know what it is in the CAS, no? But whatever it is, of course, the bulk of the work came from the student, definitely. And the student, si Dina, rightfully deserves to be the first author. And yun na nga, kaya lang because of pressures, so Don had to do that. No? So, it's one of the things I mentioned by Cook, yung power differentials, but I think the students should know what their rights are with regard to these things, and it should have been resolved right from the start. Okay, pag let's say there is a project, papasok ang estudyante, ano ba yung role ng estudyante? So these things have to be clear. No? So that's why early communication is very important. And then of course, yun nga, you have to, the evaluation has to come first from the self. I qualify to be the first author. So meron yun sa sarili mo bago pa pumunta yan sa institution. So we at ORI, we do not intend to become, ano ba tawag doon? Police of these things, no? We don't want that. That's why we are trying to promote this research integrity, including authorship issues, so that we avoid those, no? So make it minimum. So best practices ang gusto nating i-propagate, and then hopefully because of doing such best practices and giving, lagi tayong mag-search sa sarili natin if we deserve to be authors, hindi maiiwasan natin hopefully ang mga authorship disputes like this.
Thank you, Dr. Taral. Okay, so that's about the authorship. So I think the Office of Research Integrity is in the process of crafting or collating sets of guidelines for authorship, which will make it clear, hopefully avoiding such instances in the future. But what was clear was that they should have talked about that at the beginning. Okay, so let's now consider the second case. Almost, but not quite. So Danny DeBito is an up-and-coming chemist in the field of green synthesis. He has more than 20 high-impact factor publications under his belt so far, and is currently working on the development of quick, economic, clean, safe, and environmentally friendly methods for the synthesis of fused tetracyclic oxygen-containing six-membered rings from diene and diol precursors. Danny discovered that catalyst X star, which is just a slightly modified analog of catalyst X, is able to catalyze the main reaction in the synthesis of the compounds mentioned above. Catalyst X star, however, turned out to be slightly toxic, unlike catalyst X, which is not. Danny, mindful of the intense competition in his field and wary of being scooped, decided to publish his results immediately. Furthermore, he specified X instead of X star as the catalyst in his manuscript, as he was concerned that the slight toxicity of X star will undermine the importance and diminish the impact of his paper and prevent him from publishing it in another high impact factor journal. Danny reasoned that it should be okay, since X and X star are almost identical in structure. The question is, was Danny justified in withholding the identity of the actual catalyst that he used? I can see some students, so I will invite some students to please participate here in the audience. Does anybody want to voice out their opinion? Oh yes, please come. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Tammy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tommy from BS Biochem, and I would like to present my answer for this case. So the problem would be the publication of catalyst S star, but what's the name of the person po? Sorry. Danny reported catalyst X. So the research integrity breach was falsification of data because mostly common naman po sa undergrad thesis ang biases and errors. So in the lab, we were trained by our professors to report what is kahit infinitesimal lang yan or maliit na error, we have to report it in our formal lab report because some data, when we put them in statistical graphs or analysis, may have significant errors in the reports. So aside from that research integrity breach, also it concerns with the research ethics because as we discussed before, the ethical considerations on protecting the welfare of humans and the society is very important. So in this case, it was reported that Danny published a catalyst, an organic substance that may be harmful in the environment. So therefore, once hindi siya, for example, na-fail na in-approve ng board, ng REB ng university, that the paper would be published on a certain way. And then, yun nga, there would be a misconception, not just with the present study, but also the study that would use Danny's study as a reference. So the intervention would be, wag mahihiya na magsabi ng mali. So as you can see, yun nga, also the pressure, no? Usually in UP, dapat maganda, dapat ganito. Pero as time passes by, we learn from our failures. So it's very right to accept that we fail at some point, that may mali tayong nagawa. And we have to redefine and restructure the things that we report in the academe. So that would be my case po.
Okay, thank you so much, Ami. So it's about falsification, falsification of data. He did not tell the truth, essentially. Okay, so I would like to call, let's start with Dr. Villarante.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, for the second case, okay, this is really a clear violation of research ethics. Okay, now what is the purpose of doing research? No, to find solutions to problems that hinder human progress. Okay, and we as researchers are bound to moral, ethical, and social responsibilities. Okay, so that's why we do research with all honesty and integrity. Okay, so and we want to do research that will not cause harm. Okay, this is clearly a fraud in research and publication, a serious scientific misconduct. Okay, and it may have some legal implications. No? Okay, that's why in chemistry research, for example, the source and purity of chemicals used should be indicated in the manuscript, okay, that will be published. Okay, impurities present in the reagent can be toxic. Okay, and not only that, no, percent purity of the reagent used may have significant effect on the outcome of the study. Okay, such as yield, no, of synthesized product, and this may tarnish your integrity, no, as a researcher. Okay, because other researchers are filling up the gaps, no, of your study and using the same reagent but with different purity may not be able to duplicate what you obtain. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So let's give Dr. Villarante a round of applause. Dr. Villarante is actually an expert in organic synthesis. Thank you, sir. Let's hear it from Dr. Dalit.
Okay, so regarding case 2, was Danny justified in withholding the identity of the actual catalyst that he used? Okay, although many details are not clear in the given scenario, the fact that Danny reported the use of catalyst X when his work was based on catalyst X star is falsification and should not have been done. Mr. De Vito committed scientific misconduct. Okay, this lack of integrity in his reporting of his research may have far-reaching consequences. Okay, persons trying to repeat or replicate or use his work may be unable to replicate it since they would be using X instead of X star. So if the falsified information remains undetected, what he did could pose a great danger. Whether X star is used without its toxicity immediately being known, or X is used unsuccessfully in the future. Okay. So if his research was published in a highly reputable journal, let's say, na-publish niya, no? Such findings may be a basis for translational research that may put the lives of researchers and study participants in danger during clinical trials, or at any stage during product development.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sir Jay, for that very insightful answer. So, opinion, rather. Yes. So, it might be a basis for translational research, and the toxicity it will very much be an issue. And he committed fraud. Mishi?
Okay, the good thing about being the last commenter is that you can choose not to repeat anymore what everyone else has said. So I will not go that direction. But I will just say that, our behavior is often a product of the environment, right? And the kind of research culture that we promote. So perhaps a case like this, which I think all people, and I'm happy that the student who spoke kanina was able to also recognize that this is not good. This is falsification, diba? But it's easier to do something like this in an environment where you have high pressure but no oversight. Tapos sabi, di ba si Daddy De Vito, well published, maybe he belongs to an institution where reputation kind of, makes you yung parang wala nang nag-oversee sa'yo. So you kind of get exempted from the things that younger researchers might have to go through. So again, the context is worth looking into. The kind of culture that we promote as an institution is worth looking into. For example, publication bias, the tendency to favor certain kinds of results that are dramatic, okay? And we have an equivalent of that in the university setting whenever we choose to award certain kinds of research because of the results that tend to be dramatic. And that would lead to students committing all sorts of things